had to come all the way from Chicago to meet James Goettsch of Goettsch and Partners, Goettsch Partners from Chicago. And here we are in a magnificent city, and you're here to talk about how tall buildings meet the ground, which is something that really wasn't considered, I don't think, as much in the first age of, the second age of skyscrapers, like in Chicago with the Hancock and the Sears Tower. Am I right?
You're right. Well, I think one of the things that makes the situation different in the U.S. now, in the first round, the buildings, there was a Hancock building, Sears Tower, Standard Oil building in Chicago, all real corporate facilities. There was corporate money behind it, and they were symbols of corporate success and power and so forth. Now the situation is different. Almost all the buildings are the result of private development. The developers are using outside investors to put the funds together to secure the site. And then in order to build the building, they have to pre-lease it. So a big building has to be at least 50% pre-leased. And if it's 1 million square foot, it has to have 500,000 square foot of space that's leased. And it's hard to go and get 500,000 square foot tenants because you don't know how long it's going to take. So the emphasis is always on one large tenant, 400,000, 500,000 square foot. And that tenant, for them, what's very important is efficiency and economy, because they're paying the lease. And without that lease, the developer can't get the investors to give them the money to build the building. So the whole process is considerably different, and there's a lot of focus on efficiency and economy. The buildings are now much more complicated. It used to be a telephone, and the U.S. mail system was the way people were connected. But now with data and communication and so forth, the technological backbone for buildings are a very important part of when big tenants who are probably linked to other facilities, maybe in the U.S. or throughout the world. So technology is important. So efficiency, economy, technology, and then there is the physical environment. They have to provide for their workers and so forth. So the building, HVAC, electrical power, the ambience and so forth is important. And then when all is said and done, in addition, they want a building that is distinctive. Maybe that it's important as a strong image on the skyline, but where the tenant really meets the building is at the ground plane. Every day when they go to work and they're going in and out of the building, the perception of a quality building begins really with a sense of arrival when you get to the building. So it puts a lot more emphasis on attracting the whole marketing aspect of a building, as opposed to when it's Standard Oil, all you had to do was get the chairman, I like it, let's go. Now we're always competing with other developers, trying to attract tenants, and so the whole process is fundamentally different.
When we talk about how tall buildings meet the ground, we're talking about accessibility by sidewalk. We're talking about the environs around the building. In other words, it's just not a door on a street. There's more going on.
Exactly. When there was a period of time, and I think everybody is familiar with the so-called postmodern period, and the buildings were basically kind of granite boxes. They were, strictly monuments, and you couldn't see into the buildings for the most part, and the people on the inside couldn't really see out. And these buildings were, people were trying to, I think what happened is modernism sort of lost its edge with the Miesian approach was kind of, through the successors, kind of drained of its energy, and it became sort of routine. It became a very economical way to build a building but without much interest and delight. And I think there was for a period of time when people didn't know how to use modern technology to create interesting buildings. So they relied on sort of the association with historic styles, hence the Art Deco, which, is everybody. And it's interesting now when styles come, they seem to be promising, but then once you see them and you start to experience them, you realize that maybe this isn't really the way, it isn't what pretends to be. And postmodern really lost its, I think, its power once based on its success, because people, these are really just kind of plastic, they're almost cartoons of the historic buildings. In fact, some of them were actually almost intended to be cartoons. And at the same time, there was sort of a blossoming of technology. I think in the postmodern period, people were thinking technology is, it's against us. It's not, doesn't do anything for us. We're all kind of suffering from, from technology. But then with the dot-com boom, all of a sudden, technology really became kind of our friend. With the computer in the beginning looked like it was a threat. All of a sudden, everybody's connected by a computer, smartphone, and so forth. And technology, I think, had a different impact. So, and with that, I think there was a different attitude towards technology, not just in, in terms of tools or for business and so forth, but also with respect to buildings. And a perfect example, I think, is, for instance, the Apple stores and the advancement in technology with respect to glass. So all of a sudden, one time we were building concrete building or granite buildings, and now all of a sudden we have buildings or major components of buildings that are strictly glass. For instance, the Apple stores. Look at that symbol in New York on the General Motors Plaza, where you have a 50 by 50 by 50 glass box. And you go in, and there's a glass stair, and there's a glass elevator, and there are glass ducts. And, people just love it. And I think and so there's that combination, what technology brought with it, there's a certain transparency. And, transparency started to be a positive word, because in business, transparency. In buildings, transparency was positive because you could see what was going on. And, with respect to lobbies, when you walk by, when you look into the building, the inside of the building is part of the streetscape. And when you're in the building, the streetscape is part of the building. So you start to break down the barrier between inside and out, as opposed to, the postmodern period. Now, I've seen this long enough. When I started working, the dark black buildings were popular, then it became white, then it became postmodern, then it was deconstructive, and so forth. So I know that it's not frozen. This will change too, and it will evolve over time.
Thank you for coming by to see us in Shanghai, because there are a lot of lessons here and how buildings meet the ground, and just a lot of very different things to see here. Thanks for coming to see us in Shanghai.
It's my pleasure.